I'm ready. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. All right. Thank you all for joining us for this week's webcast. Today, we're talking with Dr. Debra Dean. She's the CEO and president of Dean Business Consulting, where she works with organizations to improve people practices to drive business performance. Debra, thank you so much for being with us today. As always, we start the conversation off just learning more about your background. So tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm pretty excited about being here. So I have worked in one company basically for 2 decades. And through that, started at the ground level and worked my way up. The last maybe 10 years, I've been with quality assurance, business intelligence, data and innovation, operations manager, and director of business transformation. So it's been a great process in just learning more about the business, how it works from the inside out. Once I got to certain levels in leadership, really getting into the politics in the leadership area. And then along this path, I earned my PhD in organizational leadership. So now I'm doing a lot of research with organizations to find out how to improve their culture, how to improve desired workplace outcomes like employee engagement, job satisfaction, and organizational commitment.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you mentioned one organization for 2 decades, but it sounds like you've had a number of different roles. So it probably felt like you had multiple jobs within that time period.
Absolutely. Every time you move from place to place within an organization or within the same company even, there's those little subcultures. So it felt like even though I was in the same company, it just felt different every place I went.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you mentioned culture, and we're going to focus a lot of the conversation today on that. Let's just to start it off. What is culture? What is organizational culture? What's your perspective? And then let's talk a little bit about climate and that relationship between culture and climate, because a lot of people use it interchangeably.
Yeah, absolutely. So culture is like the personality of the organization. You can walk in, let's think about if you walked into, let's say you needed to buy a pair of pants and you walk into Target or you walk into Walmart or you walk into Macy's, each one has a different feeling. And that's really where the culture comes from. It's that personality, that vibe that you get as you walk through the building, as you interact with people, if they're available, if they're not available, if they're nice, or just you feel like you're a bother to them. So it's that culture aspect that we feel in our own organizations where, pretty much everything in the company, from the way we do the business, the things that hang on the wall, even pictures on the wall, that's telling you something about the personality of the business. And whether it's formal or not, can you wear jeans? Do you have to dress up in a suit? All of those are aspects of culture. So when we look at culture, you can dissect it down into a lot. And I want to just give you a quick list of things. It includes artifacts, assumptions, beliefs, the collective consciousness, collective programming, set of values, consensus, control systems, environment, norms, structures, rituals and ceremonies, stories, symbols, assumptions, and values. So culture is really the whole business. It's pretty much everything. And then you mentioned climate. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to ask you. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on climate? Because culture really embodies a lot.
Yeah. So climate is kind of that feeling. It's the temperature that you get when you walk in. It's what the business gives their attention to. So if you're wanting a climate in the organization, let's say you're a customer-centric organization, it's what you're giving your attention to. And so are we rewarding employees because they're delivering great customer service? Are we truly bending over backwards to deliver our products and services to our customer in the best way possible? That would be a customer-centric climate. Or maybe there's a company out there that's safety-centric and they're really concerned with safety. So they reward their employees for safety. Let's say, if you've had a certain amount of days without an accident on the job, then they're focused on safety, and that's their safety climate. So they go hand in hand, because you can change climate a lot faster than you can change culture, but they do feed on one another. So if you wanted, let's say you were trying to make changes in your culture, you could start with climate and look at what are we giving our attention to and what are we rewarding.
Yeah. When you were, when you were in this company and you served in different capacities, was there one experience that made you want to focus on, company culture and climate?
There was actually. It actually coincided with my dissertation when I was working on my PhD. And I was just thankful enough that the director of my department just said, hey, go for it. And he let me do all the research and work with his team. So we had about 36 people. And I was able to do research on employee engagement, job satisfaction, organizational commitment. But in doing that, we built this subculture of what I call workplace spirituality. And it's that culture of nourishing the whole person at work, where you feel like you can come to work as a whole person. Your soul is nourished. And it gives you a chance to really care about the people and build that sense of community and have meaningful work. Those were the three main things that we were focused on. But in doing that, just coaching the leaders on a weekly basis in how do you do this well. And it was interesting because a lot of times when I was working with the leaders, and oftentimes it was a leadership group of all men, and I was usually the only female, but we found that love was very important. So the question was, well, how do we love people at work? And it was really simple we need to come to work and just care about our people, talk to them, know their name, maybe know what their family's names are, their spouse, their kids, ask them what they're doing on the weekend, build that sense of community. And over time, that one department, we ended up with some of the highest levels of employee engagement in the company, which was more than 20,000 people. And here's this little group of 36. But it was because we built this subculture of kind of a family unit where we truly cared about each other.
Wow. So Debra, let's dive deeper into that one, because that was a moment there.
Yeah.
How long did it take to actually achieve that? And what were the conditions that were in place? It sounds like you had the right level of sponsorship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, which is key. It's key. When I presented this to the director and said, hey, can I do this type of research? He said, go for it. And so I did the research and brought back a consulting report, which was just my recommendations of next steps. And he said, hey, take this and run with it. And so then that's where I was able to start coaching and mentoring and doing training with the department on what these pieces were, why it was important, and pulling everybody together. So to give you a little framework, when I started with this group, we could sit next to each other and not know each other's names.
I've worked in environments like that. Yeah.
Right. We didn't know what work we were doing. And so I started to overhear, if I was working on a project, I would hear from the guy 2 cubicles over that he was working on the same project. And I thought, we're duplicating efforts here. This doesn't make sense. We need to talk more. And so we stepped away from work and I organized this event. And this was really I think what laid the groundwork. I called it a getting to know you event. And it was non-work related, but it gave us a chance to just get to know each other. So we were a virtual team. We had people in the office and people in 5 different states. And I organized it. So kind of like speed dating. Every 20 minutes, we switched rooms. And so every meeting that we had, I think we had 5 different meetings with 20-minute blocks of time. It gave us a chance to talk to 5 different people. So you weren't, that 20-minute block of time, each time we split up, you weren't with the same group of people at all. And it just gave us a chance to have phone calls about what's your favorite music? What's your favorite vacation spot? Non-work related items, but also pretty unemotional issues, so that you felt there was that level of trust that you felt like, okay, I could talk to this person who I've never talked to about, what my favorite music is, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it really opened the door. And after that, we used that same methodology a few different times as we went through different surveys to nail down what was important to our group, how we could do it better, and then start bringing in different people from different departments that we worked with just to improve relationships.
Awesome. And how did that impact, business performance? Was there a noticeable difference in results?
Huge. Actually, this group, within a 7-year period, we recovered, I forget, it was over $7 million that was recovered. And it was through process improvements. It was, getting into the work, making sure everything was documented. So going back to culture, and we wanted to look at the business process, make sure every single work item is documented and backed up, and that we rotated it. And as we did that, and I started to bring in my department of business analysts with the processing department, we would pair up. Then we started to get that mindset shift of, how can we do this better? Can we automate it?
Yeah.
Is it even necessary to keep doing this item? Some of those very basic questions of, who looks at this? Doesn't matter anymore. So we were able to get rid of some, we were able to improve the automation, and it truly turned out to be beneficial. We didn't have any layoffs in that time. In fact, we also didn't have any employees leave the company at that time.
Oh, wow.
So we had very high commitment to the organization, and the process improvements, though, were noticed throughout the whole company.
Awesome. No, it sounds like a great working environment. But Debra, to be honest, that is not most companies.
No.
It's not.
Even departments within the same company, it was unique.
Yeah. Now, getting to organizational culture, oftentimes we know that it all starts from the top. It's important for leaders to role model the right behaviors and really own the organizational culture. But in reality, that's not the case. It's the mid-level managers, oftentimes it's the individual contributors who can clearly identify the problems associated with the organizational culture. So what recommendations would you have for people who may serve as individual contributors or mid-level managers, where they know there's opportunity there? Like, how can they advocate for a better culture within their organization?
Yeah, great question. I just had this question when I presented at OPEX in January. I had a whole room full of people, and they all truly wanted to make their culture better. But none of them were at that senior level of leadership where they could make the changes from top down. So the question then becomes, how can we figure out what needs to happen and then advocate for change? I think it's possible, just like in that example I just gave, we were a subculture. So even though there wasn't direct alignment with the overarching culture of the company, there was that one subculture turned out really well. So it shows that you can do this within your own department. And my recommendation is, first, just do it. So start to talk to people, build that sense of community. That's super important. I found those 3 aspects were most important: the love piece, sense of community, and meaningful work. And so if you can just draw on those 3 within your own team, you should start to see changes. And it's pretty simple. Start with building that sense of community. Maybe have a meeting like I did, a getting to know you event, or start taking people out to lunch, or just get up from your desk and have a talk. And it doesn't have to be work related, but just show that you care. Build that little community in your department, and that will help. And then start to look at meaningful work and really dig into those processes and procedures. You can do that by job shadowing. You can do it by rotating the work from person to person, but get into the nitty gritty of those procedures. And so if you're a manager in the department, one thing I like to recommend is for you to sit with your team and learn the process. go through the procedure, make sure it's up to date, learn the process, make sure there's some sort of data warehouse for those procedures. But as you do that, think outside the box in how can I do this better? And even ask the employee, where are the obstacles? Where are your hurdles? Is there a gap in the process? And then figure out how you as the leader can make this better for your employees. So there you're earning their trust if you can deliver on it. You're building that sense of community. You're helping them to see that their work is meaningful. It's meaningful enough if the manager is going to sit with them. So you're just continuously reinforcing that. And that's the other part, is just do this on a reoccurring basis. So it's not a one and done thing. It's something that you have to nurture and manage every day.
Yeah, no. As you were sharing that, I was thinking about recruitment. Oftentimes during the interview process, companies always want to interview for culture fit, right? What's your perspective on that? How do you assess whether a candidate would work well within your own organizational culture? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, good point. So first and foremost, the company needs to have a distinct and unique culture, period. Otherwise, you're interviewing people and doing recruitment for something that's kind of wishy-washy. So you need to really know, and Apple was good at this. When Steve Jobs was leading Apple, he knew exactly what that company was. He was very focused, and he knew what person would fit and what person wouldn't fit. Unless you have a culture that's that distinct, culture fit's kind of, like I said, wishy-washy. I think it just goes back to managing that culture. Now, you could still have that subculture that's within your department, and then as you're hiring people, figure out what type of person is going to fit within your one department. So then you're not as concerned with the overall company, you're just concerned with your department. That's a better way, I think, especially if you're mid-level management. You're just not as concerned with the overall culture of the company because it's out of your control. But then as you start to build that culture within your department and you're hiring people in that fit, other departments notice. And that's actually where I was promoted out of my department into business intelligence, because they wanted me to transform as director of business transformation, start to do this in other departments. And so then they'll start to notice, but you really have to have a science to what is our culture and be very clear on what it is and what it's not. And then you can start to recruit people that fit.
Yeah, no, that's actually really, really, really good advice. What aspect of organizational culture has the most direct impact on performance?
So what I'm finding is, first, it's the mission. So it goes back to meaningful work. If we know why we're doing what we're doing, and we have that buy-in and that passion about why we're doing, and we know that it's meaningful, that has a huge impact on your employee performance, if they show up to work, if they stay with your department or leave. And that kind of goes back to knowing your story. So I've been doing a lot of research with Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand. It's a book you can buy, and he has a really cool website. So even if you're mid-level management, if you go through this workbook on what is our story, and then you start to articulate that on a routine basis to your employees, it helps them to see why their job is important and how it relates to the company mission. So it really takes it from having a mission statement to your department being on mission, which is huge. It really lights a fire in your employees to where they're excited to come to work. They're excited to work with you. They know that their work matters, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. Debra, right now we are in a hyper-competitive, labor market where, you may have a person, they'll join an organization as an employee, then they'll join another organization as a freelancer and, jump in different capacities. How can companies properly manage their culture when employment is so fluid right now? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. before I left my last position, we were looking at recruitment efforts and why do we have so many people, such a high turnover? Why are we having such a problem getting people even in the door? Maybe they get hired and they don't even, show up for the first day of work, or they don't show up for the rest of the week. So it is a hyper competitive market. And when employees are looking at a job, they're looking at your reputation. It's more important now than just a paycheck. So just a paycheck and good benefits, that's not the only thing employees want. They want a good culture. Again, it goes back to, they want to know that their work matters. And if you can build that subculture within your team of a great place to work, a place where you feel like you belong, a place where you feel like your work matters, and where you have this community that cares about you, that starts to build your reputation for your department. So not only will your people not leave, within that time that I had in that one department, I was there about 9 years, nobody left. So
wow,
your turnover will be much lower if you have a great culture. And maybe you can't do it in the whole company, but you could do it in your department. Now, if the whole company starts to do this, wow, then you start to have that reputation on the street of, hey, you should go work for this company because it's a great place. I really love working here because of this, this, and this. Or, and so then you have this unsolicited application where you don't even have to start marketing for open jobs because people just are knocking on your door to come in. So I think it really does go back to culture and how you treat your people. What I'm finding is that it's no longer valid for companies to put their customers first or their stakeholders first. We have to put our employees first. And once you put the employees first, they take care of your customer, and then that takes care of your stakeholders.
Yes. So we have a question from Patsy. If you have a member who no longer fits in the new culture, how do you handle that?
Yeah, great question. So, obviously you could just fire them, but it goes back to that aspect of love. And how can we do this? Well, because this is part of building your culture. It's part of building your reputation. And once I had a student that said she actually loved firing people, but she did it in such a way that she recognized this person was in the wrong seat on the bus. So if you're familiar with that book, Good to Great by Jim Collins, they're in the wrong seat on the bus. And the sooner we can recognize that they no longer fit or they're in the wrong seat, have that conversation with them and really pull in, make it a coaching exercise of, this is where I see your strengths are, this is where I see that you would fit, and help them get to that next level. Now, maybe that means they just leave the company or they leave the department, or maybe you have a different project for them within your own team. Because I think everybody has, they innately want to do good. They want to do well. But if they're not given the right position or the right tools, then we're not setting them up for success. So with that, it's really up to the individual, but how you handle that's what's important, is do it with care and concern and empathy and help them get to their next place.
Oh, absolutely. All right. And we have another question from Sue. Sue, I'm going to unmute your mic and see if you can connect directly for your question. Sue, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Awesome. We can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Excellent.
Go ahead with your question.
Thanks for doing this today. I'm just curious. I'm working with a company, and one of the team members is on as well. And we are looking at the company's values and trying to understand what they should be, or if the company already has a set of values in their head, but maybe it's just not, written out on paper. How can you evaluate if those are really the right values to have for the company? Is there something that you go through, like an exercise to go through that?
Yeah. So I think it was Mark Lohr of jet.com. He said that companies should only have a maximum of 3 values. So first, if you take a look at other companies and look at all their values, and I have a list I'll be glad to share with you. But I have a list of some of the top like Fortune 500 companies and what their values are. And it's interesting to see that some of them have lists that are much longer than 3. But when you get down to a company like Southwest Airlines, they have 3. They're very distinct and unique. And that's what we want, because we do want our companies to be different, right? Because you could buy a pair of pants at any store, but you want your value system to be different than those other stores. So it kind of goes back to make sure the value that they're looking at is distinct and unique. It makes them stand out. Anything else is oftentimes just maybe a criteria list of traits they want for their employees, which is different. So I would kind of compare what their wish list of values is to other companies. And if you're starting to see the same words like integrity, customer service, those are too generic. So we really want them to be distinct and unique. And as an example, look at this real quick. So Southwest Airlines is warrior spirit, servant's heart, and fun-loving attitude. Very distinct and unique, but if you look at that within each one of those, they have characteristics or traits. And so what you may be seeing with your company that you're working with could be a longer list of those traits that you could then repackage as some really cool phrase that stands out and makes them different.
I love that, because they have a great culture, and we want to make sure that maintain that and inspire people, coming to work there.
Yeah.
I think I love that. Thanks.
Perfect.
I'd love your list too, if you wouldn't mind sharing that. I don't know if you can share it in the group or.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I was going to say we can post it in the community.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Awesome. So the next question, Debra, how can you determine if a company culture is more oriented towards mediocrity or excellence?
I love that question. Kind of goes back to what Sue was just saying. We want our company culture to be excellent. And so to do that, it needs to be different. It needs to be unique, distinct, and stand out. And if we, again, going back to that metaphor of buying a pair of pants, we could go buy a pair of pants anywhere. But what we want to do is make that different. And so if you start to look at companies like Banana Republic, when you walk into their store, it feels different. You have this different sense of, class or elegance or quality of so you want that mediocrity to go away, and you really want the high performance, the high quality, that standard of excellence that makes us stand out. So what I'm seeing in order to do this is we have to be able to tell our story. And again, Southwest Airlines, and I think you have somebody coming on in April from Southwest Airlines, but
yeah, we do.
Do you? So that's going to be pretty exciting. I was doing some research on Herb Kelleher, and one of the ways that he found that made his company stand out and be so awesome is that he put employees first, customers second, and his shareholders third. But he put this in action on a daily basis. And in that, as an example, one of his tools was his communication tool. So if there was anything to celebrate or there was any grieving moment within his employees' lives, he or his management picked up a phone and made a personal phone call to that employee or did a handwritten note. So it kind of goes back to that. It's really simple and basic, but it's stuff we overlook because we make business so complicated. It's that aspect of, that personal connection. And so he would make a phone call or send a handwritten note when somebody had a new baby or a death in the family or a wedding, or graduation, any of those. And then there was a story of he had an employee in Baltimore and his son had died in a car crash in Dallas. Well, it was interesting that the culture at Southwest was such that Herb Kelleher himself heard about this pretty quickly after it happened. And so he knew he wanted to do something. He rerouted a plane to Baltimore to pick up his employee and get him to Dallas as soon as possible. So not only did that story just resonate through the organization. But then you had the pilot who just said, you know, he's proud to work for a company like that. Those are the types of stories that need to be told in companies. And, you know, even going back to maybe your company doesn't have that ability to have those kind of compelling stories. But go back to the beginning of how your company was started. You know, the company I worked for started over 100 years ago, and it took me some time to dig through to figure out what was our history. We shouldn't have to do the research. It should just be there. And I saw where, I think it's Fifth Third Bank, just opened a museum this week that's going to showcase their company history, 160 something years worth of history of how they started, why they're going, some of their stories, the people involved, the events that happened. It's a great way to tell your story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one last question. Companies right now are really trying to follow agile ways of working, continuous improvement. To support that, how can companies create a feedback culture where people are open and constantly sharing, you know, how can we make things better? Yeah,
perfect. So this kind of goes back to that person job fit, the person organization fit in your culture. If you find that you have leaders or employees in the culture that are cynical, or they're not encouraging and empowering and supporting each other, it's going to just stop your feedback cold in its tracks. So what we need to do is, you know, ideally from the top down, do some assessments to see how our managers are with this type of feedback. We can measure on all sorts of things like forgiveness, kindness, you name it. I can measure on that and then see if I have a certain management group that maybe their employees, they don't trust them, or they're not about to give feedback because they're going to be harassed over it. You know, then we need to figure out, is that person in the wrong job? Is that person in the wrong company? And truly build the culture around support staff, the leaders that are in the company, serving their employees, serving the customers, to help them encourage that feedback. And that includes when we fail, you know, celebrating those moments of failure, because that's when we're taking risk and being innovative, right? But do it in such a way that it's respectful and encouraging, because if I'm ridiculed for failing, well, I'm not going to try it again, right? So we want to be able to do that in such a way where we're encouraged to try new things. It's okay to fail. It's okay to give feedback. And whether you do it anonymously or not, you know, encourage that feedback and be respectful of that.
Awesome. Debra, how can everyone follow you? So you're the president and CEO of Dean Business Consulting. How can we follow you?
Yeah, so I'm here on ChangeNerd. I also have a website. It's drdebradean.com. I'm on LinkedIn, so I'd love for you to like me, follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me that way. I also have a Facebook page for Dean Business Consulting. So any of those would be great. And I'm actually in the process of doing 40 practical ways to improve your workplace culture. I'm on day 8 today. So, you know, follow that. And each day I'm giving a very short practical step on how to improve your culture.
Awesome. All right. Well, this concludes our webcast. Debra, thank you so much for the conversation, and thank you all for joining us on today's webcast. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.